There's a wonderful story, a true story. And it's interesting, I happened to just come across this looking online at one time a while back. And there was a preacher here, a Baptist minister, very famous, world-renowned, by the name of Carl Marney. Any of you ever heard of Carl Marney? Well, he's gone. He'd been gone since back in the 70s sometime. But he wrote many, many books. He was very, very popular, and he was really given a bad time and criticized because he thought outside of the box. But he was here in Austin years ago. And it was here in Austin that he had an experience. And he tells the story in one of his collection of stories about a young woman, about a family in his church, at the First Baptist Church here in Austin, who had a child born, a girl, born to them. And the child was perfect in all ways, except she didn't have any arms or legs. Isn't that interesting? That was the way they felt about it. This child was perfect. She just happened to not have arms and legs. But the family was one of a great faith. It was a family, they came together, they pulled together in order to do everything that they possibly could to give this child a normal, whatever that's supposed to mean under these circumstances, upbringing. She grew into an absolutely scintillating, wonderful young person. She was well educated. She was sophisticated. She was delightful to talk to. She had made inquiries into a number of different areas where she was educated, very knowledgeable person. And although she died when she was 22 years old, she had a profound and deep knowledge of things that most people, many times her age, hadn't even begun to look at. And think about it, she was never able to move, to feed herself, to clothe herself, or to do any of the things that we take for granted. Well, when she was about 19 years old, her brother, older brother, who was off to college, he'd been in college a couple of years, and he came home for a break. He brought, for a 3-day break, and he brought a friend of his with him. Now, his friend was a sophomore, and I have to explain a little bit about that. Those of you who've been to college, those of you who graduated high school, you realize that when you're a senior in high school and you graduate, it's at that particular point that you know everything. And then you go to college, and you become a freshman, and you find out that you know nothing. And then you become a sophomore, and all of a sudden you know everything again. This particular kid was also, the friend of the brother, was also a philosophy student. You know, the kind that instead of walking up to you and being introduced and saying, well, how are you? He would say, well, why are you? You know the type. Anyway, well, he was there, and he was making quite an impression on himself being around the family. And he got to talking with the young girl just before they were getting ready to leave, and the two boys go back to college. And he said this to her: before I leave, I simply must ask you something. What keeps you from crying out in rage against the kind of God who would let you be born this way? How do you keep from blowing up in anger at the injustice of God? And the young woman looked at him, and these are his words as reported in this article. I realize that when compared to what other people have, what I have may not seem like much. But listen, I wouldn't have missed the chance to have been born for anything. I've been able to taste. I've learned to read. I've been exposed to some of the world's greatest literature. I've heard incredible, wonderful music. I've had the love and relationship of a wonderful family and friends. I have faith in God's goodness and unfailing help. Yes, I know when compared to others, it may not seem that I have very much, but compared to not being able to have lived at all, I wouldn't have missed being born for anything. Boy, doesn't that get you when you think of this?